Okay. So hello to everyone. This is late. We are late. We are delayed. This is the last talk of the day. So thanks for staying here. We are Sandra and Jesus. We are very happy to be here, and we appreciate that you stay for the talk. We come from Spain. We come far away, so we appreciate you are here. The name of the talk is Voting Among Sharks, because this is going to talk about internet voting. Maybe it's better without this. Yeah? Well, in the meantime, I can use it. I was saying that this is going to talk, the talk is named Voting Among Sharks because, what?
No, pode ser esse mesmo, pode ser.
Okay, can you use this micro? Okay, with micro, okay. Point is, this talk is about internet voting. Yes, internet voting is scary, we know. It's something that a lot of people cannot believe that it exists because people scared about that. You are security experts, so you know that everything on internet is on danger. And you know that there is a lot of hackers there that can try to attack this, and there is a lot of governmental agencies with a lot of power. So, okay, we know that this is scary, we understand, and there have been a lot of examples, a lot of bad examples of internet voting somewhere. But we are here because there are ways to do it right. I mean, you can do internet voting very well, and you can do a lot of things for doing it securely. And this is why we are here, to explain it, not to break it, to explain how to do it right. And we say this because we work on this, we research on this. Sandra, my colleague, is a PhD on electronic voting. She's specialized on security protocols and cryptography. I have some experience on security also. And we have been almost 7 years working together on this at Cytel, which is a company researching on internet voting. So it's our main subject of experience. And when we talk about internet voting, well, this is a kind of electronic voting. In Brazil, you are using electronic voting for a lot of years ago. Generally, when we talk about electronic voting, there are different kinds. You can go to a poll site, you can identify with your biometry or with your national ID card in front of a group of people, the electoral board. You can use a machine which is there, running a software locally or maybe in a remote computer. In some countries, you can print a paper ballot, you can print a paper trail. Some others no, it's like just electronic. But here we are going to focus on remote internet voting, the one that you can use from your home, from your couch, with your laptop. You are not in front of anyone. And is the one that scares the most, is the one that we like the most, is the more challenging from the security point of view, so it's the one that we are going to focus. And why governments are starting using electronic voting? Well, there are different reasons, depending on the country. Some countries say that it's increasing the participation for the young people, from people who are far from the poll sites. Some other countries say that it's more cheap than printing everything, printing papers, doing more poll sites, that it can reduce cost. And I think that a lot of countries are using it for people with disabilities that need help. If you are blind, sometimes you need help for reading your ballot, which is more easy in a computer with a reader. And if you are at home, at bed, or you are in a hospital and you cannot go to vote, if you can use internet voting, it's much more easy, and you can increase, and you can allow these people to vote. They have the right to vote. And I don't know how many people of you have ever voted through postal voting, postal mail, but I did it. It's a nightmare. From the logistic point of view, it's crazy, and from the security point of view, it's a nightmare. I mean, there is no privacy at all, there is no trust or integrity at all. So for people living abroad, this is much more better. And I mean, there are about accuracy, there are not human errors when filling the ballot, so there are not rejected votes, there are not human errors in the counting. So there are a lot of reasons that countries are using it for implementing internet voting. And at the end, is something that you can see. More and more governments are starting to use it. Some countries are doing pilots or tests or modifying the laws. Some others are already using it. But this is a trend. This is a trend that is increasing. Sorry for the resolution of the screen. At the end, it's a trend that we need to pay attention because, sorry? Yes, sorry because of the resolution, but. What? From internet voting legally binding, Canada, yes. This is India, I think. And France, yeah, and some others. Estonia and Norway and it's pilots, it's about primary elections, it's about small municipalities, but it's for doing pilots for it. There are countries which have more needs because of the size of the country, the distance to the poll site, the complexity of the ballot. I mean, in Spain we have very simple ballot and it's very easy to count it. In Australia, this is crazy. So counting the ballot in Australia is really nightmare. So there are countries which is more, they have more motivation for implementing internet voting. And when you implement internet voting, you are changing the paradigm of the security because until now, maybe, I mean, if you are young and in Brazil you have voting machines from some time ago, but in most of countries, you go and you vote by paper. And you can touch the ballot, and you can touch the ballot box, and you can say hello to the electoral board. Everything is tangible. Now, we are adding an indirect relationship with software, with servers, with data centers, with developers, system administrators, telecommunications company. These new players are bringing new risk. So it's a new scenario, it's a different scenario. Every scenario has their own risk. There are different risks. Like what? What could go wrong in an internet voting? Well, we can define some examples like privacy. I mean, privacy on internet is really challenging, you know. It's very complex to achieve. Privacy on internet is by definition, is complex. About integrity or trust, because you are clicking in a candidate and you receive a message, congratulations, you have cast your vote, and you need to trust on it? Really? It's not only about trust, also about security. Maybe the software is right, but you have malware in your computer, and the malware can modify your ballot. And then what? You think you are voting for a candidate, but you are voting for a different one. Really? No. Also about the role of private companies. We mentioned about developers, telecommunications company, data centers. They have a role in the election, but they cannot influence in the results, right? So we need to discuss about this. And it's not only about private company with financial interest. It could be worse. It could be mafias that try to coerce voters or to buy voters. And in internet voting or in remote voting, no matter internet or paper, it's harder to detect that you are being coerced. Well, a mafia can coerce voters or can try to hack the elections. There is always really smart hackers, better than us, and they can hack everything. And then suddenly you might see that in your server there is a hacker with credentials and rights. And then what? It's crazy. Well, it's crazy, but it's the same scenario that system administrators. They also have credentials in the server. You need a system administrator, you need a database administrator, you cannot avoid it. But this is democracy. You cannot allow these people to influence in the results. So we need to do something about it. These are the first 7 kind of threats that we can try to discuss with you. Let's press the don't panic button. Let's go one by one, and let's see how we can protect the system about it. So Sandra, please.
Thank you. Well, so now that Jesus has scared you about internet voting, if you weren't already scared about that, it's turn to see what can be done in order to make it secure. So the first issue is privacy. As Jesus said, we already know that privacy doesn't exist on the internet. There are a lot of, well, we are posting a lot of information in the social networks, for example, but also a lot of information about our activities being grabbed from our browsers and our devices. So we know that privacy doesn't exist at all. And the question is, how can we provide privacy in internet voting? The answer is end-to-end encryption. With this method, what is done is to encrypt the vote right at the voter computer before it is sent through the internet, in order to preserve the secrecy of the voter selections. So we are going to use here public key cryptography, and the private key that could be used to decrypt the vote is going to be provided to a set of people in which we are going to trust, which is the electoral board. So these guys are going to be the ones that are in charge of keeping this key in secret, protecting the key. So finally, when the vote is encrypted at the voter computer, and this means that nobody that is spying the communication or the submission of the vote through the internet or the storage of the vote in the ballot box, or even that gets access to the ballot box itself, is not going to be able to read what are the selections that the voter made. Of course, one of the electoral board members, for example, could try to use the key to decrypt the votes while the voters are sending them in order to break their privacy. So the idea is that we are going to split the trust among the whole set of the electoral board members. And in order to do that, we are going to split the decryption key before the voting phase in pieces, and we are going to provide each piece to one of the electoral board members. Then this key, the whole key, will be destroyed and will not exist during the voting phase, and will only be recovered at the decryption phase, after the election has finished. Then all the electoral board members will provide their pieces of the key, and the decryption key will be reconstructed in order to decrypt the votes. Still, it may happen that one of the electoral board members forgets their piece of the key, or maybe they don't want to participate at all. They don't want the results of the election to be published because they think they are going to lose or whatever. So the key idea is that we are going to use threshold secret sharing scheme in order to split the key, the decryption key, in pieces. And in order to see how it works, I will use a very simple example. So, well, does somebody know how many points of a circle are needed to find the center? The answer is 3. With 3 points, we can draw the circle and find the center. So now imagine that the center of the circle is the decryption key, is our secret that we want to split in pieces. We can imagine, or we can see here, that we can take different points of the circle, and each point would represent a share or a piece of the decryption key, and provide 1 point to each electoral board member. With any coalition of 3 electoral board members, we are going to be able to draw the circle again and find the center, that is, recover the decryption key. So of course, we can work with more complex structures in order to define different thresholds for the reconstruction of the key. So at the end of the election, the electoral board will put together all the pieces of the key in a threshold scheme, and at the end, they will see the contents of the votes cast by the voters because they will go into decrypt them. And we can imagine that our votes contain some data about us. For example, they may contain some authentication information that is attached to the vote in order to be able to verify that who cast the vote is an eligible voter in the election. But also it may contain information about our IP or some timestamp information that can be used to trace that vote to us. And we don't want this information to be present at the time the electoral board decrypts the votes, because if so, they could know what each voter voted for. So there are different mechanisms in order to prevent this to happen. The first method is called the 2 agencies model, and is based on separating the authentication phase. Sorry about the formatting of the text. So this method is based on separating the authentication phase from the vote casting phase. So we have an authentication service that will issue an anonymous token to the voter just to say that this voter is authorized to vote in the election. And this token is the one that is going to be sent together with the vote to the ballot box server. instead of something that contains some personal information about us. The main drawback of this system is that it requires a strong assumption of independence between the two services, because if they work together, they could use their information in order to trace all the votes to the voters who cast them. So there is another technique that is called mixed nets, and it is based on removing the personal information from the votes before they are decrypted, and then anonymizing it. So the main idea is that initially these votes may contain some personal information for checking that we could vote in that election, but this personal information is removed, and then the votes are anonymized using a network of nodes that is a mixed net, where each node permutes and transforms the votes in such a way that at the output of this mixed net, we cannot relate these votes to the original votes in the ballot box that contain personal data. So only after the votes are anonymized in this way, they will be decrypted and the results computed. The main drawback of this system is that this mixed net usually is a time-consuming operation, because it doesn't do only a permutation of the votes, it also does some kind of re-encryption, because if you only permute, because of the encryption, the votes are unique, and you could, at the end, trace the outputs of the mixed net with the input. So you have to do some more cryptographic operations here. And finally, there is a third method for providing privacy that is called a homomorphic tally, and it is based on just not decrypting the individual votes. So then you cannot break the privacy of individual voters. The idea is that we can operate all the encrypted votes together and just decrypt the result. In order to do that, we need to use homomorphic encryption schemes where the operation of encrypted messages or encrypted votes can be translated to the encryption of the operation of such votes. For example, imagine that we have a referendum where the voters send an encrypted 0 if they voted for no, and an encrypted 1 if they voted for yes. We can operate all these encrypted votes and obtain the encryption of the number of times the voters selected yes. And in this way, we can then decrypt just the result and obtain the results of the election. The main drawback of this method, well, it is very efficient compared to mixed nets, for example, but the main drawback is that in order to be able to operate directly the encrypted votes and obtain the result of the election, we need to use a very restricted format of the votes, and it may not work for all the electoral models that may happen. So in summary, we have seen that we have different methods for providing privacy in the internet. Oh, now it works. Sorry. Different methods for providing privacy in the internet, but each one has their main benefits and the drawbacks, and the decision of what is the method that would be implemented in each country or in each project or election will be basically based on the requirements we have and on the security assumptions that can be done on the different systems and entities. So now with the next topic, as Jesus said, one issue that may arise when we use internet voting is the fact that the trust, the fact that we are clicking and the computer says, okay, you have voted, but you have no means of checking that you really voted. For example, in traditional elections, based on paper, we can check that our vote is in the ballot box because we put it there, the ballot box is transparent, and we can stay there and check that our vote remains there. Also, depending on the country, voters can stay in the poll site until the end of the election day, and they can check how the electoral board counts the votes. For example, here in Brazil, you use electronic voting machines, and in this case, trust is based in another factors. For example, on the audits of the source code, on tests with parallel tests, voting with a subset of machines to see if the result is the expected one, and also that they are in a controlled environment, they are in the poll sites. But of course, this is not enough for internet voting in a setting where you have a server exposed to the internet containing the ballot box, and you let the voters to use their computers to cast the votes. So we need something else. For example, we have mechanisms in order to be able to trace, to provide the voters with the ability to trace their votes to certain points. For example, we can trace our votes up to the ballot box, to the storage of the vote, using a public receipt. In this case, the vote is sent to the server issues a receipt, which is a hash of the encrypted vote, digitally signed for checking authenticity. And also the server publishes these receipts in the bulletin board, which is a public site where only authorized entities, which in this case is the voting server, can publish information. So voters can check that their votes are published in the receipts are published in the bulletin board, and in this way, they can trace their vote up to the ballot box. Of course, we will need a set of auditors that check that the server is indeed publishing the receipts corresponding to the votes that are stored. We can use another method that is based on private receipts, where we can trace our votes a little bit further. So in this case, the receipt is something that is generated randomly at the voter computer and is encrypted together with the vote. So the vote and the receipt are sent to the server generates a proof of validity, and it's only at the decryption phase, when the electoral board puts together the decryption key and opens the votes, that the receipts will be recovered and will be published in the bulletin board. So in this case, the voters checking their receipts in the bulletin board can trace their votes up to the decryption phase. And now that we have checked that our vote has reached a certain stage of the process, we need also to verify that the counting process has been done properly. And as we have seen in explanation about privacy, the electoral board in internet voting may do more operations than in a traditional election. Because, for example, in case they use mixnets for protecting the voters' privacy, they will shuffle the votes using a mixnet, then they will decrypt them, and finally they will count, half calculator, in order to obtain the election results. So we need to check the integrity of all these operations in order to be able to know that in these operations nobody modified, deleted, or added any vote in order to modify the election results. And well, for privacy, the shuffling and the permutation that is made by the mixnet has to remain secret, because if the permutation applied by the mixnet is published, then you can reconstruct the anonymization operation and trace the votes back to the ballot box. So this is a secret information. Also, when decrypting, we are using a private key that cannot be published, even if the election has finished, because if so, somebody could go to the ballot box, for example, that is still in the server, and decrypt the votes that contain this information, personal information from the voters. So we cannot provide this information in order to audit the counting process. What we need to do is to use zero-knowledge proofs. Zero-knowledge proofs are cryptographic primitives that allow us to verify that an operation has been done correctly without having to provide this secret information. It's like you prove that a statement is true, but without saying anything else that the statement is true. You don't provide any related information. So with these kind of proofs, we can verify the integrity of the counting process in an open way, because we don't have to publish any sensitive information. So in summary, we have seen that we have methods in order to be able to trace our votes up to the ballot box. Also, we can trace them up to the decryption phase. And finally, we can check the integrity of the decryption and counting processes. But still, there is something remaining. That is the content of the vote, because I use my computer to select a candidate and to encrypt the vote and send it. But what happens if the computer decided to select another thing that I didn't want to? What happens if I have malware in my computer that is changing my selections? And maybe you remember, these videos are from the internet. There were a lot of rumors and news in the US elections in 2008 and in 2012 about the voting machines changing the voter selections. And I guess it is not the only country where this may happen. So The thing is that this is a concern in electronic voting, and especially in internet voting, where the voters' computers that you cannot control for the software or for the malware they may have are used to cast the votes. So I need to be able to check the content of my vote, but as we explained before, the vote is encrypted at my computer before it is sent. So when it is sent, I cannot see if what I selected, right? The question is, how do I check it? And the answer is cast as intended verification methods. These methods are focused on providing the voters with capabilities to audit cryptographic operations, because they cannot do it mentally. I cannot reproduce an encryption with my head only. They usually will need some kind of trusted component that we will see. And the main idea of these methods is that as far as some of the voters, a small amount of voters verify, we will be able to detect a large-scale attack. So one of the methods for cast as intended verification is based on return codes. And you see here an example of a voting card that is sent to the voters before the election day, the election phase. And this card contains voting options, and next to them, the return code, that is a 4-digit number, different for each of the options. The numbers will be different for each voter. And this is an example of a Norwegian voting card, because the system of verification was used in Norwegian elections in 2011 and in 2013. So the idea of this method is that the voters receive this voting card with the options and the return codes next to them. They select an option, the vote is encrypted and sent to the server, and the server computes from this encrypted vote the code corresponding to the option that is inside. Then the voter will check that this code corresponds to the option he selected, and if so, he knows that the encrypted vote that was sent to the server contained the intended candidate. Thanks to the use of homomorphic operations, the return codes can be computed from the encrypted vote without having to decrypt. So the server doesn't break the privacy of the voter during the process. Another method is called castor audit, and the idea is that the voters will use an application to verify the encrypted vote before it is cast. So the voters select an option, the vote is prepared, encrypted, and the voter gets a receipt. And then the voter can choose to do one of these operations. The voter can audit the vote, and in this case, extra information is shown to the voter on the screen that he can use to paste it in another application and check the encryption of the vote, that it contains what he selected, or the voter can choose to cast the vote. And then the vote is sent to the server, the receipt is published in the bulletin board, and the voter can check that the vote reached the server. And for example, here you can see a verifier for the auditing the votes in this mechanism for the Helios system that was used it has been used in many elections, mainly for universities, and this is from the 2009. And I don't see if you can read it, but this is the kind of information that you would paste in the verifier in order to be able to check the content of the encrypted vote. And here, there was a laser? Yeah. Here, you paste the encryption randomness that is used to revert the encryption and be able to check the content. And finally, we have another method that we call the cryptcast vote. This method is based on a very simple idea. The thing is that if I want to check the content of a vote that I cast, the most intuitive thing is that I can ask to the server, hey, give me my vote, and I can open it and check the content. No, because then I know exactly the content of the vote that is received in the server. So there are two variants of this solution. In the two variants, we started with the same process. We select an option, the encrypted vote is sent to the server, and also the computer will provide us with some verification receipt that contains some information like the vote identifier and also decryption information. So then, one approach is based on local decryption, and in this case, we can use, for example, a smartphone to read this verification information, the vote identifier, and the decryption information, and use the vote identifier to ask to the voting server for the encrypted vote that is downloaded and decrypted locally. And then your phone will tell you which is the content of the vote you cast. There is another approach that we call remote decryption. And in this case, you can use another device, for example, a regular phone that you don't need extra capabilities. And what you are doing is to provide both the vote identifier and the decryption information to the server that will decrypt the vote for you and tell the content. Well, and here we see two screenshots of the two variants of this system. The first one is the local decryption system. You can see here that there is a smartphone that is reading the verification information in order to download the vote and verify locally. And this verification system has been used in Estonian elections since 2013. And here you see the screen of the vote received for the remote decryption approach that was used in New South Wales, state of Australia, in 2015. So if you remember, we're covering the process of sending the vote, storing it in the ballot box. We could trace up to the decryption phase. We could check the integrity of the decryption and counting phase. And we had this piece missing that now we know that we can solve. So we can also check the content of our encrypted vote. And when we have when we can verify all the phases of the process, we say that we have end-to-end verifiability, because we can verify from the point of casting our vote until the generation of the election results.
Thank you. I continue. Okay. Next concern is about the role of private companies in elections. This is not something specific of internet voting. It happens in any kind of election, paper, voting machines. You need someone to manipulate or to maintain the voting machines, or security guards for every kind of place, for printing the paper, for manufacturing the ballot box. You need private companies everywhere. But of course, these kind of companies have financial interest, and you cannot allow them to influence in the election. What you can do, or what everybody is doing in traditional elections, you have an electoral board. A group of people, when you go to vote, this group of people is protecting the ballot box, is protecting the voting machine. They are ensuring that you are not voting twice, or that you are not removing envelope from the ballot box. You rely on them. This kind of people is the group in charge of protecting the ballot box. So you are not trusting on the election government. You are trusting on this group of people. And the same happens on internet voting. We create two kinds of boards. One is the electoral board, which is in charge of the privacy. This group of people is protecting the key, which is going to be used to decrypt the votes. So only this group of people can decrypt the votes. And the other group is the administration board that protects the integrity. They are protecting the cryptographic key, which is going to be used for digitalizing everything. Voter list, candidate list, election timestamp, any kind of results, configuration, whatever is important for the election is digitalized by this group of people. So one protects privacy, the other integrity. And as Sandra mentioned before, this is not a group of people protecting one key. It's a group of people that has splitted the key. So every member of these boards, using Samir's secretarial scheme, has splitted the key in search. So all of them has one smart card in their hand, in hardware, with the part of the private key, protected with a PIN code that they selected, which is in their pocket. So you need to steal a lot of pieces and know a lot of PIN codes, or a lot of people need to collude for reconstructing the key. And of course, this is cryptography. So with this, you can ensure that the key is protected, but the key is as secure as the environment is secure. So you need to provide a good environment for doing this. You need to provide an isolated environment, air gap, hardened, tested, in the presence of auditors and observers in kind of ceremony. So you are doing this, ensuring that only this group of people has access to reconstruct the key. So the key is secure. If you do this, you can ensure that these people is really required, and one single person cannot by their own decrypt the votes because they don't have the decryption key, or they cannot modify the results because it's digitally signed, but a key which is protected by a group of people. Sorry again for the resolution. By doing this, we are ensuring that this is not protected because of the software. It's protected because of the keys. You don't rely on the software. You rely on the group of people that protect the keys. In the same way that traditional election, right? And as we said before, this is remote voting. It's harder to detect if you are being coerced because we are not there. They are in the other side of the computer. We cannot see how many people are in the other side of the laptop. And they might be coerced or biased or this is a threat, we know. And in internet voting, okay, it's very easy to demonstrate your voting options. You can record your screen. You can record your voting session and demonstrate it to a buyer or to a coercer. It also happens in traditional elections. Now, with the advance of technology, you can use small cameras in your jacket. You can record your voting session, or even there are people that is doing selfies with their votes. So it's something which is not specific to internet voting. It's something everywhere. With the main advantage of internet voting that we can do some things in internet voting which are not feasible in traditional elections. For instance, how to prevent it? The most easiest way, the most common way, is to allow multiple voting. So a voter can cast as many votes as they want. They can vote 20 times. Only the last vote will be counted. Nobody is going to pay for your vote or to coerce you if 5 minutes later you can vote again. So it's stupid. Anyone is going to pay for you. The main problem of this is that the law is not ready for this in most of countries. They need to modify the law to accept that you can cast different votes, but only the last will be counted. It's complex to understand for governments and lawyers, so it's something that is cost to some governments. However, there are other ways to do it. Maybe not so specifically for individuals, but if you are concerned for massive vote buying, for large-scale attack, the best that you can do is to make it expensive. So if you want to pay for 1,000 votes, okay, it has a cost, but additionally, if we send one-time passwords to SMS, to a mobile phone of the voter, and we restrict that one mobile phone can be used for casting 2 or 3 or 4 votes, so if you want to steal 2,000 votes, you need to buy 1,000 of SIM cards. So it's more expensive. It's not worthy maybe for a large-scale attack. And this kind of mechanism, multiple voting and one-time passwords, are things that are feasible in internet voting. But they are not feasible on paper voting, so it's something that can be improved by using this channel. Okay. I'm sure you are security specialists, you are security experts. The Chuck Norris of the hackers, people which is really awesome, doing exploits, 0 days, and there are security agencies and governmental agencies ready to hack other countries. So we need to be concerned about super hackers, no matter how good we are, no matter what we do, that there is always someone better than us. And if we are in the internet, we need to assume we could be hacked. And one day, it's easy that we will be hacked one day. Okay, every security professional needs to work with this assumption. We could be hacked. It doesn't mean that we do nothing. Okay, we can do our best. This is an election, so we mentioned that the most critical activities are done isolated, air gap, so it's not so easy to hack. And internet voting is not a huge application full of services. There are 3, 4 endpoints. One for login, one for casting the vote, other for the receipt. So it's a small application, the surface is very small, and also the time frame is very small. This is 1 day, 1 week, 2 weeks. So in this time, you can ensure that you are running the last patched version of every component, that everything is hardened, tested, is very specific. So you can do your best trying to avoid being hacked. But we insist, we need to work with the assumption that we might be hacked. It's no matter how good what we do, that we might be hacked, and we have someone with credentials in our server. We cannot rely on them, which is the same scenario that system administrators. We cannot rely on system administrators or database administrators because they have credentials but we cannot allow them to influence in the results. Well, the first thing that we need to consider about these kind of players is about the split of responsibilities. Because we have been talking that some operations are done in the voting computer, the encryption and the digital signature of the vote. And we have return codes for preventing malware, so this is not being hacked by this kind of sysadmins. Okay, the servers are doing their job, so they could be compromised or they could be handled by system administrators, but there are also part which is running in isolated computers, so it's not so easy to hack if they are in a ceremony with observers or something like this. So we are splitting the responsibilities in 3 parts, and only one of them is accessible to hackers or system administrators. And during the last half an hour, we have been discussing a lot of things that I don't need to repeat, but I mean, end-to-end encryption is to avoid that a database administrator can read a vote, or the zero-knowledge proof is because we cannot rely on the servers that count the vote. So all these mechanisms are there to prevent internal attackers. So this is specifically created to avoid they could attack, they could decrypt the votes, they could modify the results, they could see the content of a vote, preventing internal attackers to do this. And we'll repeat the same slide than before. One single person cannot join the key for decrypting the votes or modifying the results, because they are split in pieces and distributed to the electoral board members. So the trust is not on sysadmin. The trust is on the electoral board. And they cannot decrypt the vote, they cannot do any kind of these activities. So well, what they can do? What is the worst that sysadmin can do? The easiest attack is to destroy things, is to do vandalism, okay? I want to boycott the election, so I will destroy the database, I will misconfigure the load balancer. Yes, they can do it. Of course, if you are prepared, you can prepare backups and disaster recovery plans. They are expensive, they are complex, but at least we can do it. For instance, in traditional elections, if you destroy the ballot box or if you destroy the voting machine, you have nothing. So if they do boycott, we can have an alternative data center and things like this, and we can still continue voting. Maybe the worst attack that they can do, if I were a malicious sysadmin, I will replace the software. Okay, I have a software full of security controls, validation, a lot of checks, everything super hardened, so I can replace the software by a different one which is not so strong and that I can manage, that I can hack. However, we have been discussing about verifiability. The vote, no matter what you do in the software, that if I am a voter, I am casting a vote, I expect to receive my choice codes. And if they are not right with my voting card, I will claim. And if I am an auditor, I am checking the counting. If the server is trying to cheat, and if the server is not decrypting well the votes, I will notice because I have the zero-knowledge proof. So with verifiability, what we are achieving is software independence. We don't need to rely on the software. No matter what software we are running, we need to see the proof. And if we can verify the proof, okay, you can modify the software, but the proof needs to be there. As a conclusion of this slide, okay, there are a lot of summary, a lot of cryptographic operations that we have discussed several times about end-to-end encryption, the secret sharing scheme, the mixnet, the zero-knowledge proof. There are a lot of things. The main problem is that they are not so well known by the public. People doesn't trust on internet voting, mainly because they don't know what we can do with internet voting. And general public or even security experts, they are not aware of this, so they don't trust on this. And I think that in a lot of scenarios that we are using, we can compare internet voting security with traditional elections. It's a very similar approach to security, and of course, much more better than postal voting. For people living abroad, postal voting is crazy, and internet voting is much more secure and is much more feasible. If you do the proper internet voting in the proper way with advanced cryptography, of course. The last sentence that I think that can summarize everything is that internet voting means that some remote computer handles your vote. It doesn't mean that you need to trust on this server. You need to verify all the things. Verifiability, verifiability, verifiability is the most important word for internet voting. You cannot trust, or trust but verify, what Reagan says. So is the main conclusion. And I'm sorry, because of the resolution and the computers, we had a demo, but I think I think we cannot. No, I think we cannot reproduce the demo. It was a video. So thanks for your time. Any question?
I have a question for you. With all your knowledge and experience in the last 6 years that you are studying internet voting, do you know if all of those countries, Canada, Estonia, and India, all of those countries use all the techniques that you describe, or someone who is just two techniques or a few of them? Do you know if if you have a chance to opinion, which country do you think is still vulnerable? It has still have a breach in the voting system. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I understand. Well, the first thing that we need to say is that this is security, so it doesn't exist 100% security. I mean, it's a matter of risk. You need to balance, and you need to analyze which is worthy for you and which is cost effective. You need to balance not only security with usability, because you want participation, and which cost, because, I mean, maybe if you are running an election for a small municipality, maybe you shouldn't be concerned that the National Security Agency will hack you. I mean, depends on the election you are doing, and depend on the cost and the security. So all the countries, no matter electronic voting, postal voting, traditional voting, they need to do a risk assessment, threat assessment, and see what fits for you. In the case you were asking specifically which is the worst country, well, this is very controversial, and I work for a company that do elections, so I cannot put an example of the worst. I can say which are the best. I mean, because I think that the kind of verifiability that they are using in Norway some years ago and in Switzerland now, because it's not only about the project of the software. In Switzerland, they modified the law to require specifically end-to-end verifiability and a lot of mechanisms, which is not an option. It's not something that the government could choose or the specific local entity could choose. By law, if you want to do internet voting, it needs to be end-to-end verifiable, publishing the source code, and a lot of different mechanisms that are mandatory by law, using common criteria. So Switzerland is the most advanced, and actually Switzerland has a very strong democracy. They are doing elections, being referendums or whatever, every 3 months. Not only every 4 years selecting a government. They are doing elections every 3 months. So people is very used to is usually voting very often, and they are very used to use internet voting because it's a very powerful tool for increasing the participation. But sorry, I cannot say which is the worst, because this is very complex question. Thank you.
I didn't think you get that, but
if the content is available,
yeah, if
you
this
mean
content
the
is available
slides?
anywhere, or there is a study of you guys that's already published, so we can check it out.
Yeah, well, about countries, no, well, there are a lot of material. I mean, this presentation is available on the internet and videos. There are papers published in conferences, and the study about countries. There are different countries doing their own studies. I mean, in Canada, they did their own, and there are a lot of material in the internet, but not all together in one place, if this is the question.
Yes. No, I was not asking the confiability of the process, just about this material they already present to us. If there is available anywhere.
The PowerPoint.
See.
Yeah, it is. I can provide you later
Yeah.
where to get
Because
it.
I want to discuss in our college, there is a group for security voting. They are discussing about this, and I want to present this for us. Another point of view.
Okay, yes, this is available. I can provide you the URL.
Nice. Thank you.
On Twitter, maybe, for making more accessible.
I don't speak English. I will speak in Portuguese and maybe they will translate. Você tem conhecimento se nesses países que usam votação pela internet, né, houve alguma campanha pública, né, para conscientizar a população? E essa população tem aceito essas votações pela internet? Você acha que está sendo uma experiência de governo, né? Ou, assim, é só uma experiência de governo e a população não tem aceitado isso? Ele está ouvindo alguma? Se você tem conhecimento, se nesses países que têm votação pela internet houve alguma campanha publicitária, né, de governo, né, para conscientizar a população a aceitar esse tipo de votação, porque eu acho assim bem, vamos dizer assim, moderno, né? Aqui eu acho o nosso sistema de votação bem seguro, mas mesmo assim tem muitos questionamentos, né? Imagina num nível assim de votação pela internet, né? Se tem sido questionado muito isso ou se você tem conhecimento que não, é bem aceito nesses países.
Okay. Well, I would say that mainly no. I mean, governments are starting to introduce it, and they try to promote mainly participation. And I think that usually citizens are relying or are trusting on the government. But governments usually doesn't do awareness to the citizens about the security. There are a specific group of people, like academics, that, I mean, it's very usual that academics talk about internet voting. It's not so usual in security conference. This is why Sandra and me, we are starting to move it in several security conferences, because we want you to understand how secure it can be, so you can describe it to other colleagues, and the day that any government or company will discuss about it, or a security group, you can know, hey, one day I listened some guys from Spain that were talking about verifiability, and you can explain. This is why we are doing this kind of awareness. Governments, usually, they are not doing this, and honestly, I can understand that their position is complex, because for a security expert or a government, it's easy to make a position against something. You can say, this is not good, and I don't want it. However, it's complex to say, this is good, and I want it, and I promote it, and this is the best, because if the day of tomorrow there is any kind of problem, they are in a trouble. So this is a not very popular position, and, well, they are not promoting it very publicly. It's right that the government that is working on it, it is a challenge, and they need to be very hard, because they are going to receive a lot of opinions against it, and there are a lot of activists against it, and no matter if something goes a little bit bad, or suddenly there is an article in the newspaper claiming against it, they are going to receive a lot of claims and a lot of visits. So there is a lot of, it's very easy for people to hate, it's very easy to claim against, but it's very complex to defend and to say, no, this is good, and I can explain, and I will be hard in my position, so I can understand, but no. I think that the main question that governments are not really promoting the security, but once the government is starting a project, I think that citizens are relying on the government, and if it is good for the government, it's just for the citizen, for the 95% of the citizens. Sorry, that maybe Sandra want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add that in some cases, the governments contact with security experts that assess them in in which are the requirements they have to ask for. Sorry, because I didn't hear the question in English, so maybe this is not the answer, but I wanted to add it. So they contact with security experts in order to help them to identify which are the requirements and the needs. It's not always the case, but it should be the best practice at the end for providing a good solution.
But again, 99% of the, or 95% of the population will not question themselves if this is secure. In traditional voting, you are not questioning, what happens once I put my envelope? How they are counting, how they consolidating the results? Maybe, or the example is postal voting. Nobody is questioning themselves. What happened with my vote when I am using postal voting? So people rely on the government. But no, they promote participation much more than security.
I have a question and suggestion. My first question is, how about, what do you think if about open source and closed source? Do you think these crypto algorithms should be supposed to be closed source? Because I think there are some diagrams in your slides which shows the power of open source. We can try to open all the processes with open source, and after the voting, generate a unique hash with the results of the voting, and let the people check their votes with the unique hash. I think it's great, but sometimes I fear people won't understand all of it. How about your opinion about the implementations, the phases which we need to step to reach more clarification?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. It's a good question. From the security point of view, I think that it's very good to use open source, and it's really healthy, because this is everything about trust. People need to rely on this, to trust on this, and confidence. And if you publish the code, you are, just because of you publish, just because of this, you are earning a lot of confidence. So just the fact of this is doing a lot of confidence. However, we need to be careful. We cannot think that this is enough, because you know it's extremely difficult to demonstrate that the software which is published on GitHub is the same that is running the election this day. It's really difficult. You need a lot of procedures, a lot of auditors, checks, sealings. So it's not only this. This is for gaining confidence, but you cannot say, oh, this is secure because this is open source. No, this is open source, so you can see it, and that's good, but you need verifiability, because with open source, you cannot demonstrate almost anything, but with verifiability, you can demonstrate almost everything. So we say this, but I reply from the security point of view, because we are security guys. However, there are companies behind the software, and companies have their own financial interest, so there are intellectual properties, so it's a matter of money. If you pay enough, companies will release the code. I mean, and I think that we can enumerate a lot of solutions which are open source, or a lot of countries which have published their code. Our own company have published the code for the Norwegian elections, and it was entirely published. The source code, the architecture diagrams, documentation, risk assessment, everything was published on the internet, because the Norwegian governments want it this way, and they pay it this way. So it's business. But from the security point of view, absolutely agree.
Yes, because I think your verification system is too fast, and in democracy, people want to be notified with some kind of change. So they like to see people in the process voting and watching the system working. So I thought the hash, the final result of hash would be more secure to cut the possibilities to some people being extorted or some like selling votes. So I think your model is very good, but the man in the middle is something what we cannot trust. So open source is really the future. And thank you for bringing us to discussion, because I think Brazil has something that other countries didn't start too soon. We trusted open sources in late 80s, so I think your idea is great. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that one of the words that you were looking for is evolution. I mean, people want to see that everything is evolving. And I mean, democracy is a really ancient, not business matter, but is the one that is not so modern. So we are using papers and paper ballot box, and we are counting by hand. In 2016, I mean, we have everything, even the most old business of the world is now in the internet. So this is not the most one, this is the second one, but this is evolution, and people want to participate in the security of the elections. People doesn't want only to rely on the government, they want to participate and verify and check and be part of the solution.
That's it.
Thank you.